All right, everybody. Thank y'all for coming to the Three Alarm Comics little stream here. And with us, we have artist extraordinaire, a good buddy of ours, Mr. Scott Collins.
Hey, ready?
It might take a few people to get started on here, but first of all, how are you dealing with all this craziness going on? I know a lot of the other people I've talked to, it doesn't really affect them much because they're used to working at home and long hours at home anyway. So, how is it affecting you?
Yeah, it hasn't affected me that way. Yeah, I'm used to working at home all the time. Now it's just a matter of, dealing with kids and everybody else who might be home and, making sure I get my work done or keep busy, that kind of stuff, stay focused. Because that's to me the best way to pass this time anyway, when you're in this situation and stuck, in a room and working like I am all the time, is to keep yourself busy on projects or the next thing you have to work on, that kind of stuff. Otherwise, yeah, the clock starts ticking real slow if you don't have that going.
Well, speaking of which, are you still currently working on something? I mean, I know nothing's being printed right now, but you still on something right now, or you just still kind of biding by time like everybody else?
Bouncing around. I'm actually waiting on some script for some more Flash stuff. And hang on, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Um, Waiting for some more Flash script, more Shazam to come through, and Jeff Johns and I are talking about something else, which we have to wait and see what DC says about all that.
Very cool. Well, I guess we can start off. Can you kind of give us like a little bit of history of how you even got started in the comics industry? Like who your influences or what actually got you started into this? Oop, there you go.
You got quiet for some reason.
Oh, your microphone muted. I saw
It's
it
not
on this
muted. I
end.
could still hear you, but
We can hear you fine. Well, nope, nope. Something's going
now
on. I
that's
keep seeing
bad.
the microphone getting muted.
That's weird. The thing that happened was, hang on, let me. I don't know why it's doing that. Are you me? Yeah, is that louder?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sorry. Um,
You're good.
what was the question again?
No, I was just I was asking, trying to ask about a little history of your work. Kind of what started you in the industry. How did you get started doing this, and even who are some of your major influences?
Okay, my history. Started buying comic books when I was around 7, I think. That's when I first found them on the shelf. Fell in love with them immediately. Couldn't get enough. Couldn't find them enough. Started drawing on my own anyway because I thought it was just so neat. So I draw pictures of the characters that I was reading at the time, or immediately starting off with. I don't know. It just it seemed inherent in there that you would make up your own characters as well. So I was always making up characters, pretty much as I was drawing anybody else that I was reading at the time, the Hulk books or Hulk, Green Lantern, Legion of Superheroes. Gosh, lots of stuff back then when I was first buying. But I was also often sharing comic books with a best buddy of mine. He'd buy some set, I'd buy this other set, and then we'd swap and share all the time. Um, but then by around junior high time, I don't know, eighth grade or so, I had been working my newspaper route for years, and somewhere in on that route, I had this one guy that I was delivering to. He was a college student, I think, and somewhere in his room when he was writing his check to pay me for the newspapers, I saw something about comic books. So all of a sudden, we started talking about comic books, and he said he knew a guy in our hometown who went to his church and drew for comic books. That was his job. So I immediately got in touch with him as fast as I could, and started pestering him every week, and found out there was like, I don't know, 6 of us guys or so that were constantly pestering this guy all week long, not letting him get any work done. So then we wanted making a club out of it so that we'd meet once a week, um, and talk about comic books, work on comic books, and start making projects, and start working on pages and doing all that stuff. And the guy's name was Dennis Jensen. And the funny thing about it was that he was actually inking the Flash at the time when I met him. He was inking
Oh
over
wow.
Carmine Infantino on those very later issues, probably like the last 3-4 years or so of the book, somewhere in there. Um, Incredible inker, very talented and stuff like that. So then he would take me through the paces of how to make these comic books and do that sort of stuff, which then led to the Kubert School, which then led to me breaking in. The couple years that I went to the Kubert School were phenomenal and giving me a lot more of the raw information that I needed to start breaking in. I see we have a question. What was my first comic book? If I have it right, if memory serves correctly, it was Hulk 180, which
Oh, wow.
was the issue before Wolverine appeared, and Wolverine had nothing to do with it. I didn't care two wits about Wolverine. It was Wendigo that was the awesome thing about
Oh,
that
yes.
book. I had been a monster fan since I could see TV or read books or whatever I did. Godzilla, King Kong, all that other kind of stuff. Creature from the Black Lagoon, all that. So when I saw the Hulk on the stands, that was the one that made me skid to a halt, stop and sit down at the magazine rack and just start flipping through the pages.
So did you ever end up getting the issue following that?
I think, as memory serves, is that there was two consecutive issues. I just don't remember if it was 179 and 180 or 180 and 181.
It was 180 and
With my luck, it
181.
was probably 179. I only have one of them remaining after that time. I think I still have my copy of 180. That's been beaten, slept on, rolled, probably taken through a river and dragged. Just about everything you could when you were a kid.
Well, recently I noticed too. You've been putting up, doing quite a few commissions online, and actually offering some really, really, really spectacular artwork on them for a very, very good price. If you want to let anybody know about what if you still have that going on. I know you're doing special deals during certain times, and I didn't know if you even had any covers left to even work on right now.
I do have a few left. I'm trying to think of which is over here. I have, this special deal I've got going on with 6 of the remaining out of the 14 books that you had sent me. So yeah, you can contact me on Facebook or whatnot, Twitter or Instagram, and we can work out the details. The sketches on those blanks were on sale as a simpler deal because I'll show one of these. I don't think they'll be upset about it, but it was just for a figure only.
Right.
So that's what I'm working on. Or normally I would be doing all sorts of crazy stuff with backgrounds, and that's one of my regular con sketches. So this one is just the figure work, but it makes it a little easier, quicker for me to do, and then more affordable for some of the fans that are out there, because they can't always afford the larger drawings I do. But it's great.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a good way to pass the time. It's a lot of fun. Plus, I get crazy requests once in a while, which is awesome.
Well, you got started. Talked about earlier about how you got started in comics. What were some of your major influences as far as what kind of helped you develop your style and the things that you see that make you fan out?
The earliest influence as well, it probably would have been, I think more of the early influences weren't necessarily on the style of what you see of my drawing as much as the kind of storytelling that I do. I was very happy or lucky with the fact that when I started reading comic books, a lot of the guys that I first read, I think, were really solid storytellers, which helped my base knowledge of how to tell stories and think of scripts and break them down, that kind of thing. And that would have been Herb Trimpe on the Hulk stuff for the longest time. And he was such a great storyteller that all seems to come almost secondhand to me now really easily. And then the first guy that I actually figured out a name to a book and I figured out who the artist was, that kind of thing, was I saw some Iron Fist over here that I really liked. And then all of a sudden somebody had turned me on to these brand new issues of X-Men at the time, going like, oh wait, the hands look, the faces kind of look, oh, it's the same guy. I see his name, John Byrne. So then I was a big John Byrne guy for a long, long time. If you would have seen my terrible, terrible sketches back in high school and that time, I would have been a really poor John Byrne clone, probably is the best that I could have achieved at that time. Byrne and I was right in that hot time for those guys of Byrne and Perez. And thankfully, they're both really good storytellers as well as pushers and innovators and creating characters and all that kind of stuff. Those are the biggest influences through like high school time. But by the end of high school and going on into college or the Kubert School, then I had really figured out where some of the things came from. So I started recognizing the stuff from Kirby and from Toth and all those kind of guys. the Silver Age and Golden Age guys, and the guys who had kind of taken those next steps from comic books just being this panel to art, that was almost in a manufacturing kind of state because it was so repetitive and so many things you had to do a monthly book. There were the guys like Barry Smith, and Bernie Wrightson and those kind of guys where you go, oh, right, you can do the same almost genre of material, but you can make it artwork and it can be painted and a lot fancier if you want it to be. But it opened the possibilities to then, realize there's guys out there like Frank Frazetta or other painters, NC Wyeth, all that kind of stuff that give you other information of how to be an artist and how to move through it so that I could do comic books, but push came to shove, I could be pushed into other fields as well and hopefully not be terrible at it. I see another question.
Gayla's asking you. Yeah, go ahead.
You remember any story in particular that jolted you as a reader? Well, there were the big ones during those Byrne and Perez days. The Phoenix story for the X-Men was a real heart stopper. But all of those stories back then, I thought they were all just tremendous stories. The Proteus saga, even the little arcade story, of course, the Magneto stuff they did, all those things are really good. The Titan stuff was constantly doing great stuff. I was just rereading those the other week. The Blackfire story, when we first got introduced to Starfire's sister, was really cool. Of course, the Terra storyline that even my kids know of because of the Teen Titans cartoon. That was really fun to see them watch that play out. I mean, it was pretty close in the cartoon how it was in the book. There were little tweaks and differences, but at that time, they were too young to watch the Teen Titans cartoon come out the first time, so they saw it on a rerun basis, I think on Boomerang or something like that. But the cool thing was, it was after school, and every day after school when they'd come home from school, it would be on. So it was like this daily fix, and you get the next piece, and they played it in continuation of, every episode. So every day they were coming home screaming about Terra and pulling their hairs out, going, "Wait a minute, what's going on? No, it can't. No, she can't." All that stuff.
Well, speaking of cartoons and stuff,
some of the big ones. Byrne's Galactus story in FF was awesome.
Oh yes.
When they took out Galactus for that little bit. Lots of those little things. There's too many other ones that are just going to burn in my brain.
Well, speaking of the cartoon stuff, for me, and we're pretty close to the same age. For me, I always loved like the Don Bluth, back even when they had the whole video games for Dragon's Lair and Space Ace and everything like that. I used to plug many quarters into it just because, not because I wanted to play the game, but just because I wanted to continue to see what the artwork and the animation continued to do. So, I probably spent way too much money, and I still never beat it until they finally came out with it on DVD, where you didn't have to play the game. You could actually sit there and watch the thing.
I was terrible at those games. There were some games that I was picking up on, and I can't remember the Castle Cagliostro? I can't remember the name of that thing now. There was that other one that they had changed it was a anime cartoon, and the guy was fighting ninjas in a castle and all sorts of stuff. And that was another one of those where you had to figure out the pattern of the up, down, left, right, to dodge and do whatever the animation needed you to do.
I'm trying to remember that one. That one doesn't strike a bell. Wow. Okay. Well, you're kind of known for working. First of all, before we even get any of that, how do you feel working as a penciler versus an inker versus a colorist versus a writer? Because I know you've done pretty much every single one of those things across the board. Which one is more, satisfying for you? Is it actually putting the artwork on a board, or actually coming up with these stories, being creative in that way?
I guess the most satisfying would be the, it's doing it all. The creator-owned books that I've done are still pretty much my most satisfying projects I've worked on. Warts and all, mistakes and whatever else in there that I go back and look at them now and wish that I had changed something, or I think of a better way of doing it in hindsight. But those are the most rewarding. Then, just as a regular thing over my career, the length of a career, it's been the penciling and inking job that I've done the most. I've had some covers that I've liked of my own that I've colored as well, but that's a little more hit and miss, and I'm never as quite happy with all that stuff. Whereas for some reason, with the penciling and inking assignments that I've had, even in hindsight, even looking at the mistakes that I might have made back then, or wishing I had done something differently, um, I'm a little kinder to myself about all that. Going like, yeah, well, no, I mean, it was good at the time. I really was excited about it at the time. Even with these little things in here, I know they bother me, but they probably don't bother half the people that see them. Just like when I talk to my other artist friends, they might be nitpicking their own piece of artwork to death, that they're really mad about this, shoulder they drew or this knee or whatever. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Look at the whole thing, man. It's really cool. So those pencil and inking jobs are, thankfully, since that's been most of my career, those are always very rewarding. But it is those creator-owned books, when I did my Adam Point 3, or even the Pastaways, or other stuff like that, when I've come up with the writing and the story of it, or even the stuff I've done at DC when I did Citizen Cold or Solomon Grundy, that kind of stuff. Those are hugely rewarding to actually fill, in my own small way, those shoes of the guys like Jack Kirby or John Byrne or George Perez, or those kind of guys that got to write and draw the whole thing. That's really been the dream all along the way.
Well, very cool. Anthony Albrecht just popped in. He said the video game was Lupin the Third, Castle of Cagliostro. It was based off of a Miyazaki movie.
Yep, that's it.
So that's probably why it looks so freaking fantastic. Speaking of which,
yep, exactly.
Apparently I saw they just unloaded all 21 movies for Miyazaki on the Studio Ghibli stuff onto Netflix.
Oh,
so that'd be
That's
something
awesome.
great to show the kids too. Yeah, speaking of creator-owned projects too, the one that really sticks in my head, I don't know, it feels like it came out not long ago, but was Adam 3.
Yeah, that's a few years back now, but yeah, that's still. I hadn't looked at it in I don't know, at least a year or so, and then I found a copy when I was digging for something else. So I sat down and kind of glanced through the 4 issues that came out, and I still really enjoyed it. Actually, that was one of those where I didn't have that many things that I looked back and went, oh, I should have done this instead, or critiqued it in that fashion. It mostly just brought a big smile to my heart. It was really enjoyable. I wish it had continued.
Well, yeah. My thinking was getting to see a lot of these creator-owned projects, which you got to go through. Most people, correct me if I'm wrong, you went through Image to put that one out.
No,
No?
the Adam book and as well as Pastaways were done around the same time. They were both done through Dark Horse.
Dark Horse.
I had
Okay.
a really good working relationship with Dark Horse off and on for many years, working with Richardson and Radney Stradley. And they were just natural, one of the people that I showed samples to for Adam. I showed it to Image and I showed a couple others. And while all those were in the talks, basically it just kind of wound up that turn anyway, that Dark Horse was the best deal. They offered me there was absolute creative freedom. They didn't change one whit of anything that I wanted about the comic book. There were very few suggestions, a couple things about the writing and the plot wise. But that was even more just the idea that my initial plot for Adam was really just an ongoing plot that would have lasted at least 20, 50 issues. And then we were more narrowing it down, going, okay, let's just give it a first 5-issue arc or something like that. Let's actually finish the story and maybe leave some things, that can turn into the next story, that kind of deal. But they were a little bit more stronger on the idea of making sure that it had some sort of ending, so we could at least test it first before we made it as a monthly ongoing, that kind of thing, which made sense because ultimately it did not quite do as well as we were hoping to perform to carry on for everyone to get paid.
Well, do you think maybe in like today's age, where a lot of these things, a lot of these smaller independent books, especially the black and white ones, are going super strong, that maybe it might be time to maybe try to shop it around again? Because I actually personally love the book.
That's been suggested to me a couple of times now. So yeah, it might be something I'm looking into in this next year, definitely.
All right, cool. Well, earlier you mentioned being at this Kubert school. How was that? Versus, I mean, I'm lucky enough to know quite a few artists, and almost all of them. I think you and maybe Jeff were the only two that I've ever met that actually had gone through the Kubert school. Everybody else is either self-trained, taught at home. How much did you feel that helped you out into going into this avenue versus just staying at home and learning on your own?
Oh, it was tons of difference as far as working from home or just learning on my own. It probably would have taken me at least, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of the intermittent home study that you get to do part-time while you're working or doing other things, or your friends want to hang out and do all that stuff. That would have taken me all those extra years to kind of coalesce all that information that the Kubert School gave me. They gave me a lot of basics. They tore apart all my bad drawing at the beginning during the first year. Took me back to anatomy books and all that kind of stuff, so that I learned from the basics on again as a solid basis, knowing perspective, working on the whole perspective of the book, so that even if I didn't have the job, we had lettering assignments. We had a lettering class, so that every day of the week you would have a lettering class and you'd have assignments and you'd work on things. You'd work on logos, you work on regular typeface like you were doing a comic book, or you'd make up magazine things or all sorts of stuff. So even though I don't technically do that in a normal paid for my day-to-day job, it was still very smart for me to learn all those basics of how that works, even in a comic book form, which was also one of the highlights about the Kubert School, is that so much of the Kubert School is focused on comic books themselves. They teach you to do other stuff as well, and I'm sure it's even more broad now that they have computers and all that kind of stuff in the recent classes. But the rounded perspective it gives you on all those artistic talents. I had painting classes and all those kind of things. I don't think I ever did a great job at any of those painting classes, but at least it informed me of some, at least, color theories and stuff like that. So when I'm talking to the colorists on my books, I can talk about what I think of their work was working really well with my line work for the book and for the telling of the story. And then I can also maybe suggest some other things or bounce ideas off of them, but be able to speak in that language that colors would be speaking in, of hot, cold colors, bright, dim colors, I forget, on values, all that kind of stuff that we would be specifically talking about, and how to work from panel to panel, page to page. And the Kubert School did all that amazingly well. On top of that, one of the other huge benefits of going to the Kubert School was that it's just a bus ride, train ride away from New York City. And especially when I went there, both DC and Marvel were in New York City at the time. So if, I'd be cold calling people or doing all sorts of stuff after my first year of school and onto my second year of school. And if I got, an interview with one person at one of those companies, boom, then I just got my bus ticket or my train ticket and headed into the city, and I found out where to go and went knocking on doors, and, that made it very almost convenient in a way, because you're so local then that you'd be there. Also helps, to be available for those initial jobs, especially that, that's the way things used to be as a regular business anyway, for 30, 50 years up until around my age or so of people coming in. You had to live around there. There was no real FedEx thing so that you could live across the country so much, or even out of the country. There was none of that internet stuff for you to live anywhere else, so you had to live there. And the Kubert School being right there was a huge advantage.
Well, cool. Well, one of the things you brought up too was the whole the lettering thing, and so it was a perfect example. And you also brought up the digital thing. How do you feel that in today's computer age, everything going digital? Like I know people that pencil digitally, that ink digitally, that of course color digitally, but even now lettering is kind of like a lost art form because of the fact that now they've got 18 million programs that'll do the thing for them with a tenth of the work. Richard Starkings to me did the whole gambit as far as the lettering stuff went, and then now Joe Blow on his computer can. They haven't learned the basics as far as of how to lay out and set up and dynamics of it, but they feel that they can do the exact same thing.
It is one of those things where it can make it very easy for anybody seemingly to walk up and all of a sudden be able to do this job. But you quickly be able to tell, just like if someone didn't go to school or didn't train enough on their own properly to draw the comic book and wouldn't know perspective and wouldn't know how to lay out panels, that kind of stuff. Maybe they're actually brilliant at their figure drawing, but if they don't know the rest of it and how to make it work for a comic book, it'll be clear as day as soon as they start drawing you a page that you can't read from top to bottom, left to right, or in succession. And that shows through for any of those other guys as well, for the guys who are coloring or for lettering or inking, any of the jobs that are in there, or the writers as well. If they're not versed in it, it will be clear that, first, say for a letterer, that their balloons are not set up in the right fashion to flow correctly, There's a bunch of different theories of how to lay out your balloons, how to make them work, how the tails to each person's mouth work to help for the flow of the panels, um, um, all that kind of stuff, including all the modern takes on it now, so that where a lot of people won't use thought balloons, they'll use those caption boxes. But then, at least for Marvel and DC, most of the times, those caption boxes are now marked with a logo at the beginning of it, so you know if it's Wonder Woman thinking this panel, they have a little WW on there, or a bat symbol for Batman, that kind of thing. So yeah, the programs being there is and available is only akin to me the idea that any of us could be pencilers. You could just pick up a pencil. It's the same as idea. Yeah, you've got a tool. Now, what can you do with that tool?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like like I said, lucky enough to where I know quite a few different I get an inside look into how things are done, so I don't come into it with glossy eyes anymore. But the biggest part I've seen is just like you said, the hard work that goes into it, the training, the skill, it actually, believe it or not, it takes you must learn perspective and anatomy in order to be able to use it to twist it around to make it work in a two-dimensional format.
That format, but then also it's that to me, continuing on with that, is that puzzle piece, the jigsaw puzzle of the panels themselves, and how to make them work, how to make you go read from panel one, from the dialogue that might need to be said first, to then seeing the person in the panel do whatever they're supposed to do, and then possibly there's a punchline at the end of that panel of someone responding to the action or something that's going on. There could be many levels to one panel that needs to play out, and then that first panel, after completing those 3-4 jobs, needs to lead you to the second panel. It can't mistakenly lead you to the third or fourth panel, and then all of a sudden your eyes have to stop, go, wait, I thought, oh, I've got to go back here. Oh, now I've got to. If you have to keep fighting to do all that stuff in the middle of the story, then that takes out, I forget how someone phrased it recently, but it basically takes away the other necessary component for a comic book, which is the person reading the comic book. They are absolutely a major factor in how books are read and how they're enjoyed. They're that extra X element of it takes their brain as they're working on it to go, okay, I saw Spider-Man in the first panel swinging across New York City. In the second panel, now he's kind of coming down and he's on the street while there's some collusion going on, some big kabang. And then the third panel is him maybe catching somebody or pushing somebody out of the way of the danger he was in the third one. But then your brain, in those gutters between the panels and those different images you get, your brain are putting those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things together so that the movie starts playing in your head. And that's where the magic happens. That's where people all of a sudden start believing and really enjoying these stories like something real is happening, because the real thing's happening in their head. It's not on this piece of paper. This piece of paper isn't speaking. It's not alive. It's not doing anything. But if we've worked our magic on the paper correctly, it then translates to your head as you're reading it. And now it's a movie. Now it's a thing. Now all of a sudden you're upset because Spider-Man, lost this at the end of the day. And oh my God, is he going to make it to Aunt May at the end? I don't know. That's the magic. If you've done it right.
So you're basically an advanced version of a storyboard artist, because as a storyboard artist, they use very basic loose stuff. You're tightening everything in and basically just feeling a little bit more than you're giving the reader a little bit more than what it's like looking at your breakdowns versus looking at your finished pencils.
Yeah. We are kind of a magician that way of doing it, where we're just trying to give you just enough information to allow you to read and enjoy and know what's going on, or know what you need to know and be wondering about what you don't know that's going on in that page panel in that issue. It's a big magic trick, and that's where I think there's a huge difference between the guys out there that can pull you into a story so that, the pages are pretty and this and that, and you start flipping through. But if it actually pulls you in and it stops you, so like, all right, I saw page 1, and then you find yourself on page 4 that you've stopped thinking about the world around you and everything else and what's going on. You go, oh, this is happening. Oh no, he's stuck here. Oh, I got to turn the page. Oh no, it's going on to there, and on and on. Yeah, that's the magic of it all. That's what we're all trying to, the big trick we're all trying to pull is to get your mind involved in it, believe enough of it, or understand enough of it so that you fill in all the gaps. That's where I think there are certain books out there where they've been translated to movies. Um, and some of them, I think they were brilliant as a comic book.
Hmm.
But if you take that comic book as verbatim, just that comic book the way it is, and actually translate it onto a thing, so someone's speaking those balloons and doing all that other kind of stuff, now you're unpersonalizing it to that reader. So that a lot of times I don't think the movies work in the same way. Whereas when you're reading, say you're reading a Superman book, and you're hearing his thought balloons or reading his captions, and then Lois says this, and then Jimmy Olsen says this, and going back and forth. You got to remember, part of this magic is it's your version of Jimmy Olsen who's saying it
Hmm.
with your kind of inflections, your thought pattern, maybe with a Southern dialect if you're down from Mississippi or somewhere. You know what I mean?
Oh
It
yeah,
doesn't force it to be that all of a sudden you're listening to someone else's version of it. It winds up getting filtered through you as the reader. And that's really part of the magic that, like, that can't happen with movies. That can't happen with audiobooks or TV shows or anything else. They have to give you a full-fledged version themselves that's going to impose upon you which version of the Joker it is, which version of Green Goblin this could be, or whatever it is. So it's not that as applicable, I think, as comic book can be. That the Spider-Man that's put down in the book is often still it's distilled through your brain. So it's
right,
very
right.
unique of how each comic book can be appreciated.
I think about the only comic book that I can think of that did translate almost perfectly to movies was when Frank Miller did the Sin City stuff. I could go through and watch it and see, I mean, like panel to panel shot. It's like he wrote it to be the storyboard for a movie.
It's very much like that, and for the 300 as well. Except actually, that's the thought in the back of my brain. The visuals work really well, but I think Frank's dialogue and all that very iconoclastic, whatever you want to call it, dialogue that's in something like Sin City, I think that plays off way better in everybody's head than it does
Hmm.
for Bruce Willis or someone else to speak it out loud. And it's one of those things to me where I don't know if it's almost like a weird kind of twist on a Shakespearean thing, but I think Frank's stuff is often 100 times better in your own head than
I
it is
agree.
actually coming out of someone's mouth.
I agree. Yeah. We're talking about other things, about how all this stuff. But one of the things I see, and like I said, I kind of get the benefit of seeing the other side of the bed there, or whatever, however you want to say it. But
Yeah.
you know, I look around, and especially as a retailer, I see a lot of books that have nothing more than panels of pinups, and they're very pretty to look at, and but hard to keep track with. A buddy of mine, Mitch Bird, actually told me. So he said, probably one of the best things you can tell anybody as far as wanting to continue as this is learn storytelling. He said if you can have 2 or 3 pages of two people drinking coffee in a coffee shop, and in your head you know what the conversation is about without any word balloons in it whatsoever, you're pretty much that's a good starting point.
Yeah, that was one of those rules at the beginning that people were teaching me at the Kubert School was the idea of having your pages, but basically, even though there might have been a full script or something that we started working with, was take out all the word balloons, look at your page, show it to someone else, not you, show it to your mom, show it to an uncle or somebody, and have them tell you what's going on in those pages in that book. And it's real interesting. That's why I'm saying it's so subjective of how you do that. Is that you might get an uncle who doesn't even know who Spider-Man is, and he
Hmm.
goes, I don't know, there's this weird guy here, and well, you drew him really scary over here. He's really Spider-Man-ish and doing crazy things. So the guy's like, well, the uncle's like, I don't know, he could be a villain here. All of those things translate and do stuff so that you pay attention to, yeah, what basically comes across visually. I think it's a little more a marriage of things, so I don't think it should be one of those, which was impressed upon me early, was just that, oh, you should be able to read your comic book without the text and the balloons and everything going on. You should be able to understand everything that's going on. No, I don't think you should be able to understand everything, but they should be working in concert together
Hmm.
to give you some sort of again a stimulus that you can't get on your own. Like Frank Miller would have drawn, the panel that would have Batman's shield on his chest, and then you'd see him falling down in space or whatever. He just got a gunshot to his chest or something like that, and then he's falling out and catching himself or whatever he's going to do. That's cool of its own. You understand what's happening in the panels. But then when he throws in that extra bit that he put in Dark Knight of saying, well, why would you think I'd put a target on my chest? Because I can put a bulletproof
Right.
thing right there. That's why I did it. Whoa,
Yep,
whole
mind blown.
mind-blowing, extra piece, so that there's two pieces of that puzzle to really make that one piece of artwork.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, but it's like a perfect example. I was over at John Dell's house, and he was inking Spider-Man at the time. And of course, nowadays none of the original art has the word balloons on them anymore. I had no
Yeah.
frame of reference from the script. I had no frame of reference like looking at the artwork, and I kind of got a little disgusted for a second because as I'm looking over this beautiful artwork, it's basically looks like, unbeknownst to me, Peter Parker was dating a smaller person. But the way it was drawn, it looked like Peter was kissing and making out with a kid. So it really it was a little disturbing until after talking to John and him explaining to me what it was, because these were issues that I should not have seen but had not come out yet, and they're months still out, but I'm sitting there looking at it, a little perplexed over what was going on.
And that could be part of a story that they're hoping will be something of a twist or a real dichotomy between the panels of artwork and the text that's going on. But yeah, there's a lot of that it needs to be consciously worked out as to what exactly is the story and how exactly you're going to tell that story. There's been a million times when I've had a script mentioned in a panel, and they would say that this silhouette figure would be standing over here, or this hand comes in and picks up a telephone and talks on the telephone, but we don't see who it is. Okay, but you didn't tell me. I'm drawing the book. Is
I
it
need
a
to know who
man's
it is.
hand,
Yeah.
a woman's hand? Am I supposed to hide the hand so we don't see it? Then why put? It's a guy standing in the corner. Okay, he's in silhouette. Does he have a hat on? Is he 6 feet tall? Is he 3 feet tall? What's going on? Those are still the things where you have to work out the whole magic. One of the greatest assignments I had, two of the greatest assignments I had at the Kubert School was, one of them, my first year of classes, was to do a 2 or 3 page story that was nothing but silhouettes of figures.
Okay.
Backgrounds and everything else could be tables and house and whatever it was. I forget if we had made up our own stories or if they gave us something for that one. But all you'd get was basically the outline of whatever figures are going on. So then you're realizing that, me holding the coffee cup, trying to go to the camera, me holding a coffee cup this way in a silhouette, you wouldn't see it.
You'll never see it.
Or
Yeah.
me drinking the coffee cup this way, you wouldn't see it. So all of a sudden, all the stories had to be this way. So you could see the coffee cup and you could see someone drinking. And although that doesn't need to be necessary all the time, it is important sometimes realizing the simplicity of how you want the information traveled to your brain sometimes, of going, well, you don't want to hide the fact that they're drinking a cup of coffee. If it's really part of the story, like there's poison in my cup, putting the poison here and making it that visual a part of the thing, you go, oh no, here it comes.
Mm-hmm.
Versus hiding it here, they may not get the effect with it. So one of them was the silhouette story that we had to do. And speaking to your same idea of not understanding or misunderstanding maybe the visual reference going on, one of the teachers I had was Bart Sears. And one of the first assignments he gave us was, I think it was just a normal, like 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or something like that. He said, draw anything you want, any characters you want, monsters, people, doesn't matter. All I want is, out of the drawing, I want to see good versus evil. And everybody keeps asking questions like, I can draw this, or I could draw Punisher, or I could draw this and that. But he's like, whatever you want to do. I just want to be able to look at the end and see good versus evil. They're going, oh, this is great. And suddenly everybody's drawing like Punisher versus Wolverine, and the guns are out, the claws are out, and they're having a great time drawing this picture of all this violence or different things going on, or even, even if it was, Superman punching bad guy or something like that, like good try. When you take it out of context and it's just that piece of artwork, almost nobody in the classroom got it right. Because they were just drawing two people fighting or something like that or whatever. There were only a few guys in the classroom that got it. So it was like, oh, right. You can actually tell, like, this picture of Superman was him defending, like, a child versus a robot coming in that was breaking the city or something like that. Then you got the context. It was absolutely foolproof for misunderstanding going, this is good versus evil. You could see how something was evil. You could see how something was good. Most of the guys are just like, woohoo, we get to draw bullets. And, you wouldn't get it. You would realize when most of the guys failed that first project where I was like, no, they don't get it.
It's almost like in the old westerns where the bad guy always wore the black hat and the good guy always wore the white hat.
There's a bunch of that is shorthand for those kind of things, but that's the thing is those become shorthands which can still work, but at the same context, in the end of it all, you could be showing the guy in the black hat actually doing something really good, and the guy in the white hat who's doing something really bad or whatever, or something that could be misconstrued, again, without having tons of dialogue before that or tons of dialogue after to explain what's going on. You're just worried about the implication of just that image. Like here I'm saying, oh, we got these great shots of Batman or Spider-Man and they're looking creepy and they're hanging over a building, and that doesn't show them being a good guy. They're not doing anything good yet. They might be interesting and they might be, a bit scary in an interesting way or something interesting like that young kids might be interested in and bring them into the story. But then, do you show them being this hero or doing something like that versus just doing random stuff that doesn't tell a story, which I think is one of the other major problems coming in, like you're saying, or we were saying the other stuff with, you have lettering programs, but does that mean they can letter? I think there's a lot of people who are writing comic books these ways in that same fashion, or people editing and writing those books where I don't know if they're bored with what they think has been the stereotype of good versus evil or that kind of thing, but I think they keep placing various landmark, characters that we know and love and putting them in these very neutral situations so we don't know what's being good or what's being bad, or it's very, I think, unappetizing a lot of times what they wind up doing with that, rather than, no, it doesn't have to be spoon-fed and doesn't have to be completely obvious. But I mean, the reason, to my mind, these characters have lasted so long is because they're good guys.
Right.
We are interested in the Doctor Dooms and Lex Luthors or whoever else, but
it only makes the hero look better.
Yeah, the book is the Fantastic Four. It's not Doctor Doom's book. Doctor Doom's book hasn't been around for 50, 60, whatever years. The Fantastic Four has, well, for most of that time.
Wow. Okay, man, you kind of filled me in on a lot of stuff that I was kind of unaware of. It basically was stuff I'd already known in my head, but you kind of give me an explanation for a lot of it. So, man, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's just all the stuff that we keep sharing. I just saw interviews with Howard Chaykin the other day, which I look for half the stuff on YouTube or whatever, and then I see his point of view when he's talking about it and what he learned from the guys that he learned before. That's where, to me, half of the fun of me doing this job for as long as I've done it now is the idea that I'm still picking up things. I'm still learning stuff. I still hear something from this interview, or there was a Neil Adams interview that I heard yesterday that just blew me away because he's telling some other stories and being rather strong-minded like Neil is. But then he tells a story about how 1960s DC comic books, until he came in and shook them up a little bit, one of the weird things of old comic books was all the restricted colors they had, right? He found out at that time that in the simple process they had, there were, 3 shades of blue that you'd get, 3 shades of red, all of that stuff, right? And then 3 shades of yellow. Except DC didn't even have that at the time, which made DC's books in the 50s and 60s, or early 60s anyway, even different from what Marvel could do. And he went, look, Marvel's got 3 shades of yellow. You've only got 1. You could have 100% yellow, or you'd have no yellow. And Neil's telling the story. I'm like, wait, what? Really? They did this? And it was all a question of, could they afford it? And they found out then at the end of the story that it didn't even cost them anything more. They just had to change their system of how they were working on it. But that's one of those things that I love about this industry, again, for as long as I've been in it. I can hear all these new stories and new vantage points on storytelling, or the production making of the books, or whatever, all that stuff. It's infinitely fascinating how to put these books together.
Well, so you've known for doing quite a different dichotomy of things. I mean, you're really known for doing the Flash, of course, but you also worked on some of my favorite stuff, Legion of Superheroes and things like that. How do you feel working? I mean, I know it's got to be easier, But as far as satisfying, do you prefer single character books or do you like having a team book?
uh, the old question.
Now I know
Both are
financially
satisfying in
is
different ways to me because ultimately, I like both. I don't know if I'd label one better than the other. I mean, maybe a solo character, but sadly, in my career, I have not worked on that many team books. I worked on Avengers,
hmm
and I did some Justice League stuff here and there, um, or Legion of Superheroes. But even in working on those few that I've got, um, that was one of those things that I always heard early on with George Perez was that he loved working on teams books because you'd get all the uh, relationships between the characters and how they bounced off each other, and this one didn't like this one right now, and these two were fighting over here, but then there's this love triangle between these three over here, and what's going on, all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, I think when you have a solo character book, you still wind up almost having basically a team book in there because you have to have those other people that fill out those other roles. You have the Mary Jane or the Lois Lane that's the girlfriend or something like that, and you might have the coworker that's in trouble, or the Flash Thompson, your rival at school, who you've got to avoid so he doesn't try to beat you up during school hours or something like that. You wind up having that roster of characters around you, whether it's the team book or the solo book. But that is half the fun. Is when I was working on Flash, how much of it did we get Linda in the book? How many times we were ecstatic a couple times that we got Linda on the cover,
oh yeah,
because
yeah.
she wasn't usually expected on the cover half the time. But we did that a few times, which was great. But even when dealing with Wally West and the Flash and what his cast of characters at that time, that was half the fun of having Pied Piper in there as a supporting character, or bringing in some of the other Chunk or some of the other guys that he had known, and how they dealt with it, or the two cops for the longest time, Shire and Murillo.
hmm
They were almost part of the regular cast at that point. That's where, when we did the Flash story, the 750 story where it was Captain Cold, Jeff only wrote them in one panel, where they were appearing around the door of their cop car as they came up to the 7-Eleven kind of liquor store, or whatever it was. And I had an extra panel where, yeah, okay, we draw them that they're leaning out of their car door and they're waiting for Captain Cold to come busting out. But then I threw another panel in so we could really see their faces up a little bit closer, and make sure. And in that way, that was one of those things that I learned around the time of Flash, or it might have been Legion of Superheroes, somewhere on there, that even with looking at the script of what the story was written, and how the writer started the story here in the alleyway and then went here or whatever, and then okay, we go to Wally West's apartment or his house, and then we're doing things in the kitchen, and then he changes the costume, runs off to be a superhero. Okay, but when I'm forming all of that in there, how exactly am I posing and putting my characters together so that within the context of what the story that the writer wanted, Jeff wanted for the Flash stuff, how am I making sure that at some point, even though they're being introduced, that Wally introduces himself to the reader at some point with whatever he's saying, even if he's talking back to Linda or whatever else he might be doing at that point, he basically still has to talk to the reader too, and say, with all this stuff going on, hey, I'm Wally West. This is my book. I'm the main guy, and then we go on with it. There were a bunch of those where, not so much with Jeff stuff, but it was around the time that I figured out with Jeff stuff going, oh, here's my moment in the first 3 pages or so where I make sure that this is my moment when Wally says hi to the reader first, and then we go on from there. Or when the Flash first shows up or something like that, he might have a mysterious beginning where it's just the wind passing by or something like that. But then then there has to be the punch at the end of that sentence of his introduction, going like he was just whipping back and forth, but then boom, he ends, and then you finally see him. But then it's got to be that. Is that how we introduce him? Is this the thing? Is this the cool sequence to end it, to bring him in? Yeah, that's all the stuff. I don't remember even how I started this, but that's where I went.
I was asking what your take was on a team books versus a single book, but quite honestly, I've always considered the Flash more of a team book because he's got that rogues gallery, that arsenal of side characters that actually play so much into the mythos of the Flash that they are a essential part of of the character and the book.
Absolutely, and I think more of the successful books that we know of, that you can immediately call out that cast of characters that are the supporting characters, or the main list of villains, all that kind of stuff. Whether all the really successful ones, Batman, Spider-Man,
Hmm.
Superman, any of those main ones, you mean for Batman, you go, oh right, well then there's Alfred, and there's Dick Grayson or his son Damian or whoever's there. For a while they had the whole thing going on. I loved it that was Damian's dog, or was it Bruce's dog, was always there?
Yeah, oh,
That
yeah, yeah,
Doberman?
yeah.
I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was
Ace the
a
Bat
great
Hound.
extra piece of the puzzle that you would see on a regular basis, knowing this is his family unit. This is who we're used to. But yeah, Wally did have that, and it was an integral part of it being a good, enjoyable book. Absolutely.
Well, see, that's what I've always found. Flash has always been one of my favorite characters, even growing up. That him and Legion, and I think I just more identify with it because it was it was kind of the opposite of Batman, where Batman is pretending to be Bruce Wayne. Is what basically his whole personality. He's Batman, but he tolerates Bruce Wayne to get to his end goals. Whereas on the other hand, with Flash, whether it be Wally or Barry or whoever, it was it was the story of their life and everything around them that brought you in, and occasionally you'd get a superhero villain.
Yeah, no, all of those things combined helped, I think, bring those people, those characters to life on the page, so that's where it can be hollow sometimes if Batman's only running around and punching villains from time to time, then he's not going to last very long. Sorry, I'm just checking my battery's running low. I thought
Oh, you're good.
battery's running low. Let's see if I can get it back on. There, it's charging again. Um, if he doesn't have Alfred running around, if he doesn't
Mhm.
have Damien or someone else as part of the story, or now Selena Kyle or something like that as part of his regular unit of what his home life might be, as well as what he does on the street kind of thing, then yeah, it doesn't ring as true. It doesn't make you feel like it's a complete story. There's something missing, I think, at that point.
All right. Well, actually, we've gone for almost an hour now. But I wanted to before we get done, I wanted to kind of the last thing I really want to ask you is so you were recently a guest here at Three Alarm Comics for Free Comic Book Day, and of course now we got to postpone stuff for next year or this year.
Right.
But then also probably got to do one of the last cons of the year when we all went to Pensacon.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
How do you feel about doing, like I said, smaller shows like a store signing and things like that versus a bigger one? I know they both got their pros and their cons. Uh, you know, how do you feel about actually going out and doing the stuff? I know it takes time away from your family, takes time away from your work, takes time away from a lot of different things. Is it something you still enjoy doing, or is it something you just like to do whenever you actually have the free time?
I do enjoy doing it. I do enjoy traveling around and seeing different sites, and meeting different people. And that's the main thing for me, is the reason to do the cons, is how much I might interact with either other pros at the con, and chatting with Shop Talk, or the fans themselves at the table, that kind of thing. That's usually the makes all the difference in the world of whether
Hmm.
it's a great show or not. Yeah, I might be busy and hopefully earning some cash or whatever, so I can bring something home to my house, but and my family. But it's usually the time spent with the people, hanging out afterwards at dinner
Hmm.
or the bars, or and having those conversations at the table at the show. That's what makes it all worthwhile.
Well, I'll let anybody know that is watching now or watching later. Let's say from the very first time I met Scott and Jeff Johnson when they were both here, and even through over to Pensacon, really and truly kind of said some of the nicest people I've ever met. So down to earth, and it's one of those weird things where you kind of get to meet some of these people that you've seen forever, and they completely blow you out of the water with any expectations that you had going into it, because there was no ego, there was no uh, uh, you know any type of I'm better than you, no anything. You guys basically almost immediately became part of our group, and it was a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I had a great time at your store, and thanks for hooking us up with that Pensacon too. That was a great show and fun stuff. And it's just always nice to hang out and have a good time with it. I mean, I find that that's most of the people in the industry are like that.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody is pretty much down to earth, and most of them just want to hang out, share some laughs, share the love that we have for this funny little pamphlet of a book that we read from time to time. It's all the love of that book that brings us together, and I think like I don't know, 95% of the people that I've met have always been along that line. So, but thank you very much. I had a great time too.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and cut it short. Well, cut it long, and we'll have to get back together and do this again sometime soon.
All right, sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, man.
All right.